So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Buckles Fall Circulation meetings for fall of 2021. We welcome you here this morning, and I would also like to welcome the P&P committee and thank them for being here with us today. So we have lots of people on hand to answer questions. So hopefully all of your questions will be answered today. So a couple of things to get started. First, please remember to leave yourself muted when you're not speaking. But when it is your time to speak, if you do raise your hand and you would like to speak, go ahead and unmute yourself. And then just remember to mute yourself again once you're done speaking. If you have any questions throughout the meeting today, go ahead and use the question and answer, the Q&A section in the Slido tab. You're going to find that on the right-hand side of your screen. That's where you're going to type all of your questions, and I'll be monitoring those questions today. If you have a question that you would like to raise verbally, you can either raise your hand by hovering over your name in the participants panel, and then you'll see a little hand icon. Go ahead and click that hand. Or in the bottom toolbar, you'll see a reactions tab or button. It's a little happy face. If you click on that, you'll also see the raise hand option within there. So you can raise your hand, we'll call on you, and you can unmute your microphone and ask your question and have your discussion. Or you can, if you just have some chat that you would like to contribute, you can do that as well, raise your hand, or you can do that within the chat box. Go ahead and contribute that within the chat box. But all questions, please put them in the Q&A section of that Slido tab. That would be really helpful for us today. So today's agenda is going to include a presentation from Eric on VPN and the new Vega system that's coming to us for our ILS. And then Mike will chime in with some reminders, some really helpful reminders of things that we've gone over in the past, but we thought you would benefit from hearing again or came up in the survey questions. And so then we'll transition right into those survey topics. And then if you have any questions or you have more that you would like to contribute, we will definitely add that in at the end. So without further ado, I present Eric.
Thank you, Joseph. Hello, everyone. In case you don't know me, I'm Eric Lazaskis, the Director of IT here at Buckles. And today I'll be covering VPN and Vega. These are two new things that you may have heard about, but if not, you'll be well versed by the end of today's meeting. So to begin, VPN. What is it? Why are we doing it? And when is it happening? So these are the big three questions we want to cover. Let me give you a little bit of history about our ILS. You may or may not recall that we went live with Polaris back in 2012. At that time, we all used the classic Polaris client. That is the client with the toolbar and the little multicolored dots or orbs, as Polaris always referred to it. This software had to be installed on your library computers, and it had to be directly connected to our network in order to be used. So whenever you were accessing patron records, checking in and out materials and more, this was all done within our own network. Then in 2015, a new client was released. At that time, it had very limited functionality. It was called Leap. And instead of being a piece of software that was installed on your library computer, it was accessible through a web browser. We started testing this new client with some beta test libraries. And over the years, it became a more full-featured product, offering linking capabilities and other features previously only in the Polaris client. So fast forward, here we are in 2021, and Leap is approaching full Polaris client functionality. It's getting closer to becoming a full replacement product for the classic Polaris client. While this is exciting stuff, it also introduced some complexities in terms of security. Since it's essentially a website that is used for working with the ILS, by default, it was accessible throughout the internet, not just from within your libraries. Of course, the access is restricted to only those who know a username and password to log in, but it still isn't the best security to have something like that wide open to the world, especially when it comes to protecting sensitive patron data. When I mention sensitive patron data, I'm referring to the names, addresses, phone numbers, checkout history, all that information that we have on patrons that's in our system. We have a responsibility in protecting that patron information. So the solution that we're implementing is called VPN, or Virtual Private Network. VPN works to extend a private network, in this case, the Buckles network, to other computers or devices that may not be on that network, such as one of your own library-owned computers or tablets. You may have heard about VPN as a way to hide browsing history or securely connect to certain websites like banking websites when using public Wi-Fi or other types of networks. Similarly, we can use VPN to provide access to any non-Buckles device or computers that need to use things like Leap. So the why for VPN is to protect the sensitive patron data that's in our system from unauthorized access. We want to make sure that only library staff have the ability to connect to Leap, Simply Reports, and Buckles Reports, those three things, and prevent others throughout the internet from even being able to attempt to access these records. The when is January 1st, 2022. On that date, we will be preventing outside access to Leap, Simply Reports, and Buckles Reports, and you will need to use a specific VPN client on any device or computer that isn't a Buckles computer already on our network. So, with all I've been talking about here, if your circulation PCs are Buckles PCs already, then you don't need to worry about this change. However, if you do use a tablet on occasion, or you use laptops for serving the public at events or remotely outside of your building or not on the Buckles network, you will need to start using a VPN client. So let's take a look at how to install this. I have a series of screenshots of the process to walk through the steps. This installation portion only has to be done once on each device. First, you want to open your web browser on the non-Buckles device or laptop and visit https://vpn.buckles.org. So you might want to jot down that website address, but it's available many other places as well. You'll be prompted to log in with a username and password. These specific VPN credentials have already been sent to each of your library directors. If you need them, please ask your director for that information. If they need assistance, they don't have access to the password, they never got it, whatever it might be, your director can reach out to Buckles and we'll provide those credentials again. So we'll assist. After you click on Log On, you will then see a prompt that looks like this. And it says, you are connecting to the Buckles network, unauthorized access prohibited. Click on Continue to go to the next step. So you just click on Continue. And then you'll see this lovely page that says Cisco AnyConnect Secure Mobility Client Download, which is a little bit of a mouthful. If you didn't guess, the VPN product we're using is called Cisco AnyConnect. You'll see a button that can be used to start the download for either macOS or Windows. It'll automatically detect which operating system you're using, and it will only show the button that you need. Also, in the bottom right, you will notice a plus sign with the word Instructions. Now, normally most help and instructions aren't very useful, but these instructions are actually quite good and include screenshots of the process for how to install the application and any other prompts you might see during the process. So in this case, I do recommend clicking on that instructions button before you download so that you can refer to it during the installation. If you've installed software on a computer in the past, this installs much in the same way. You run the application once, you click Next, and you go through the options until it says the installation is complete. This installation, as I mentioned, is a one-time process. And it's one of the reasons we selected Cisco AnyConnect as our VPN product was because of the simplicity. Once it's installed, it automatically checks for updates. It updates itself whenever it's needed. And you'll see in a moment just how easy this product is to use. So after it's installed, let's talk about how you use it. Whenever you want to use Leap, or you want to access Simply Reports or Buckles Reports, once again, on non-Buckles computers and devices, you will need to run the program Cisco AnyConnect. You should find this now installed on your device, and when you run the application, you'll see that a window that looks just like this will appear. It should already have the hostname vpn.buckles.org entered. If not, put it in there, and you simply need to click on Connect. You'll then be prompted to enter your username and password. That username and password is the same. Is the same VPN credential that you used when connecting to vpn.buckles.org to obtain the software. So that's the same credentials in that case. Enter those there, and in the future, it will automatically remember your username for you so that you don't have to enter it each time. You just have to enter the password. And that's all there is to it. At this point, you'll be connected to the Buckles network, and you'll be allowed access to secure websites hosted at Buckles. Another great benefit I want to mention is that whenever you're connected, Cisco AnyConnect provides protection on that device from malware, viruses like cryptoviruses, and phishing attempts on any of these non-Buckles devices. It does this through Cisco Umbrella, which is the same protection that we have in place on over 1,400 workstations throughout all of the member libraries. So whenever you're using the Cisco AnyConnect, you're getting those protections as well. After you're done for the day and you want to disconnect from the Buckles network, you simply click on Disconnect in the Cisco AnyConnect application. That application is probably going to be minimized, or it might be in your sys tray. You just simply double click on it and you'll see this window, and you can click on Disconnect. And that's all there is to it. So just a quick overall recap. Whenever you want to access Leap or other secure websites at Buckles, you first want to run Cisco AnyConnect to connect to our network. Then you can use those websites and everything as normal. And once you're done, you go back to AnyConnect and click on Disconnect. So you may be asking yourself at this point, how would this work on tablet devices like an iPad or an Android-based tablet? Well, there's a Cisco AnyConnect app available in each of those appropriate app stores. So, for example, if you're using iPads, you want to go to the Apple App Store. And if you're using an Android tablet, you want to go to the Google Play Store. You want to search for Cisco AnyConnect, and you'll see one of these two screenshots like I have here at the bottom of this screen. And you simply download the app to your device. The only additional step you'll need is to enter vpn.buckles.org as the host name. But past that, it's just simply entering username and password and connecting. All of the instructions that I've been talking about here today are also available on My Buckles. And there's even a video tutorial that I made that's up on our Buckles YouTube account, cleverly named Buckles Tube. So if you haven't been there or seen those, we have a whole bunch of tutorials available as well. At this point, before I continue on, let me see if there are any questions that have come in related to VPN. Joseph, how are we looking on that?
There are no questions at this time, but okay. I will keep you informed.
Okay. And just a reminder to everyone, feel free to type in questions whenever you like. If they're related to what we're talking about, we'll probably answer it right then and there. But if not, we will answer it at some point during the during the meeting.
Now the questions are starting to come in.
All right. Is there a reason to not just stay connected to the VPN all the time if it's a device that's only used for work purposes? No, you can stay connected at all times. Being connected will provide your device additional protections with Cisco Umbrella, so that's great. And it's configured in a way to only allow you access to Leap and Buckles reports and Simply reports. It's not opening up access to further things, so you can leave it running at all times. Will it stay connected if the device goes to sleep? Okay, so if the device goes to sleep, so there's two things for that. If the monitor just turns off and the device stays on, it will stay connected. If the device actually goes to a sleep mode, Cisco AnyConnect will disconnect, but it should automatically reconnect when the computer wakes up. So generally, it's pretty good handling sleep. And there was one question that came in yesterday, which I forgot to mention, which was if it times out, and it does not time out. So you can leave it sitting there all day. You can walk away from the computer for 10, 20 minutes, have lunch. You won't have a situation where you come back and you discover it disconnected. It won't do that. It does have a session limit where it can only stay connected for, I think, 14 hours or 15 hours, but that should cover an entire workday. We just don't want it staying on perpetually. So you can easily connect just once a day. All right,
we have one more that just came in. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, go ahead. If I already have a VPN client installed on a non-Buckles device, my home computer, when work from home, do I still need to specifically install AnyConnect? If you already have a VPN client, it depends what that VPN client is for. If that VPN client is connecting you into... Now, you probably will still need this AnyConnect product because that's connecting you specifically to our network, whereas the VPN client that you may already have might be connecting you to your library's network or another non-Buckles network. So you probably still do need the Cisco AnyConnect as well. That's a very good question, though, about using both at the same time. Let me know. Let me know how that works, and if you need assistance with it. I have not tried using two different vendors of VPN connection at the same time, so that's kind of interesting. This is available now, so please do start using it. You don't have to wait until January 1st. So give it a try. See if there's any problems. This goes for everyone, and we can assist you if anything comes up. So now that you're all pros on VPN, let's talk about Vega. This is relatively a new product that you may have heard about that was recently approved for purchase at System Council. If you haven't heard about it, no need to worry. Here we go. Vega consists of a suite of products that we're purchasing for Buckles. That will be one of the largest changes to the patron-facing side of libraries since we went live with Polaris almost 10 years ago. One small piece of the Vega suite that I want to go over today is called Vega Discover. This product is a replacement for our existing online catalog. It provides a new modern search that should function a lot better than our existing catalog, helping the patron find material in new ways. For example, how many of you here have gotten lost down a rabbit hole, browsing the internet or searching for things on Google? Perhaps you're looking for reviews on a movie, and before you knew it, you were browsing other movies that a particular actor was in and discovered a whole new wealth of things to watch. Well, with new features that are coming with Vega Discover, there will be enhanced content on all of our records that link things together. There are author pages that show topics and related works, and the patron will be easily able to see other books in a series that they may be interested in. It's something we call serendipitous discovery, and finally patrons can have that experience with their local library. So I want to share some neat features that we'll be getting with Vega Discover. First, there's what's called roll-up views. This is a feature that groups different formats of the same title together, so you'll be able to have a single record that comes up in search results that contains links to both large print and paperback, and even e-content versions of the record instead of scrolling through pages of results just to find formats that you want. Additionally, there's a group hold feature being developed so that patrons can place a hold for first available of any format of a material. Group holds were always something possible from the staff side, but now patrons will have the ability to do that on their own. In addition to the series information and other enhanced content that will be available, patrons will also be able to search for material by Lexile, accelerated reader, age, or grade levels without additional cataloging work. Author pages will exist where you'll be able to see photos, biographical information, other works that the author has written, and related works. There are also topic pages that help with serendipitous discovery, and we'll even have better carousels of book covers that are in Vega. They're called showcases, which can automatically be created like the New York Times bestseller list, for example. Or they can be curated by your library staff and embedded anywhere you like. So you can put it in email marketing, you can put it on websites, you can put them anywhere to help promote the content and material that's available in your libraries. So I know you're probably eager to see what this looks like, so I brought screenshots. Here's a few to go over. This screenshot here shows the roll-up views feature. As you can see, I did a search for Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and instead of getting 4 different records that I'd have to scroll through, I see one neat record with tabs for the formats and editions. It has a tab for book, ebook, e-audiobook, and book on CD in this case. You can also click on the author's name. If you notice, it's kind of a blue color here, which means it's a link. And that would bring up an extended author page with additional information on that author and other works. Let's take a look at an author page for Margaret Atwood. Here you see that it automatically pulled in a photo, biographical information about Margaret, and it pulls resources and other works together as you scroll down on the page. And here's a screenshot showing some of the advanced searching capabilities. When looking for material for specific reader levels, there are tabs across the top which you can use to filter search results by Lexile measure, accelerated reader, or age and grade levels. Vega Discover also recommends other titles of interest that may be suitable for the younger reader. So not only are we helping the patron have this, as we're calling it, serendipitous discovery, but we're also helping them to find material for that younger reader to help foster the next generation of library patrons. There are many other features as well that will be coming with Vega Discover, and we plan to be launching a beta test version in March. Of course, we won't be taking away the existing online catalog, but we'll be offering this new platform for patrons that may want to try it out and give us some feedback. So hopefully you're as excited as we are, and we can't wait for you to try it and let us know what you think. Are there any questions about Vega before I continue on?
There are no questions just yet.
Okay. I'll pause for just a moment, see if anything comes in.
Questions, concerns, trepidations, anything, please, feel free.
Well, if anything comes to mind, feel free to type it in and we could talk about it a little later in the meeting as well. So at this point, I'm going to pass the floor over to Mike, who will lead us through some helpful reminders. So Mike, take it away.
Eric, can I just interrupt you before we do that?
Sure.
A question did come in.
Yeah.
Will there be training for staff?
Training for staff. So yes. Let me talk about training a little bit. So we will have some webinars available, some training most likely from Innovative, some opportunities to learn how the Discover platform works. But one of the great features that's built into the new the Vega Discover product is actually something that we've requested over the years, and they finally put it in there. It's kind of like a first-time walkthrough for new patrons, or the first time you use the platform. You may have been on websites before where the first time you connect, it kind of has like an overlay over the entire screen, and it kind of points out things and says, click here to search for materials, click here to go to my account, here's where you can go to filter things. So there's kind of this overlay screen, like an intro welcome, which should actually help the patron side of things as well for training. So yes, for training for staff, but also we'll have that built-in training component for patrons as well. Thank you for the question.
And
So the current catalog on Buckles and Vega will exist side by side. Yes. Will it eventually replace the current one? Yes, most likely it will. The current catalog will probably be having that available for the whole year of 2022, I would imagine, maybe even a little bit beyond. But as Vega Discover becomes a more robust product, because we're very early into the product, they're developing a lot of these features as we go, we'll be pushing more and more patrons into that side of things. At some point, that will kind of become the default. And maybe it'll just be a link to the old one instead of a link to the new one. But yes, they'll be side by side for quite some time.
that covers what I was about to say. Just I was going to reemphasize this is going to be a gradual transition. You're not going to get any surprises over a weekend or anything like that. There'll be plenty of time for the transition to that new platform.
Yeah, one of the exciting things about all of the Vega products and everything really Innovative's been doing lately is it's on a different development cycle than we're used to. You're all probably used to hearing from us about twice a year where we'll say, hey, there's a new version coming out. We're doing an overnight upgrade. And, when you come in the morning, hopefully it worked and, and all of that stuff. The development cycle for all of the Vega products is every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks on a Monday, new features and things will just trickle into the products, which is kind of exciting because we don't have to wait as long to see things that we want developed actually appear. So even some of the meetings we've had with them, it's when they talk about a feature coming soon, they might say like, oh, this is a little bit further out. And we're used to thinking further out means next year. And they're like, no, that means, 2 months. So that's kind of an exciting piece. Does it stay on your library during searches? I'm going to hope that it does. This is something we'll check and make sure that that's working properly as part of their development. I'm assuming you mean if you're doing searches that it suddenly pops out to, like if you had your library selected as the search, that it might go to everything again? Thinking that's what you mean there? Will it be easier to filter for what your library has? Yes, there'll be a quick way to filter for that. There's facets on the side. And we'll also be getting feedback from you all on how this is working and be able to give that feedback to Innovative. So
I'll just chime in on that last question.
Sure.
Again, we're waiting to see what they meant by that, if it stays on your library.
Sorry, Mike, I'll just interrupt. Yes, that is what they were referring to.
Okay. So that I mean, as Eric said, I mean, it's currently still in development, so we're gonna, it's coming along. So we'll make sure that we. The problem with the current pack that some of you might experience is just that because each library has their own link to the pack. Like sometimes you'll follow a link that goes to the system level. Sometimes you'll follow a link that and then there's timeouts. That can occur. But the one thing, the one benefit, and I forget if you mentioned this, Eric, but with Vega is that the way it's going to function is if you're a patron and you're logged into the pack, it's going to highlight your library for you, unlike our current catalog where it sort of doesn't care what to a degree what library you belong to. You need to still pick which library you want to browse at. So that'll be more convenient for patrons, but also staff if you have to be logged into.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and then there's one other question here: when can we start tinkering with Vega? I know I'm eager as well. We were hoping that the tinkering could start in January, but it looks more like a March start for being able to play with it a bit. There were certain consortial features that were not fully developed yet, so we decided to wait just a few months so that it could be more complete of a product. Instead of having some frustrations with, why doesn't this do this? We'll just wait a month or two, and then we should have some of those additional features. So the answer for that should be March. Can patrons check out electronic content directly from Vega? Yes, they can. With the Overdrive, it's going to begin with Overdrive with that e-content because that's our central collection. And they'll be able to actually see the status of that material right from the catalog. They'll be able to check it out right from the catalog. And with the embedded features, they'll be able to start reading it right from the catalog. So it doesn't even have to have them pop into a different application. It will just load right within the catalog where they can begin reading that item. So yes, it's pretty nifty. Other things and integrations like Hoopla and stuff like that, that's coming. That's down the road. But we're starting first with our central collection because that's every library is using that. Will there be an app for the patrons? The app is another product called Innovative Mobile. And yes, that is going to be coming in the beginning of next year. It's going to start with searching very much like our existing catalog has. But in the long run, it will also have features of Vega Discover searching integrated into the app. So the app is going to be coming, and that's going to be something that's customized per library with your branding and specific social media links and services and things that you provide all within the app just for your library's patrons. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Mike at this point. Mike, it's all yours.
Thank you, Eric. For those of you who may not know, I'm Mike. I'm the Buckles Systems Administrator, the custodian of all things Polaris. I'm going to share my screen with you here today, and we're going to go over some quick reminders, or potentially quick reminders, some of that including some topics you guys put into the survey questions, and as well as a few other things we want to bring up because they've come up previously at other meetings and support tickets and so forth. And then from there, we'll move on to some of our general topics. So let me share my screen, make sure I have the right one. Sure, there we go. All right. So first on our list of reminders is the patron barcode change form, or the procedure every library should be following, when it comes to changing a patron barcode. And for those of you who do not know what we're talking about, anytime you change a patron barcode in the system, whether that be internally or externally, you need to be aware of one thing mainly, and that is whether or not that patron utilizes e-content, specifically Overdrive, or that they use the Libby app. Anytime that barcode changes and that patron already has e-content checked out or e-content hold requests they're waiting for on Overdrive, there'll be a potential interruption of access to those things that they had previously requested or had checked out. The reason for that is Overdrive is specifically just looking at that patron barcode number. It doesn't have any other IDs or any means of tracking who that patron is. So if you have a patron that utilizes e-content, or if you're not sure, and better safe than sorry, there is a form to fill out anytime that patron barcode number changes, whether they have a new card or what have you. And that form is readily accessible on the MyBuckles website under where you would find the rest of our regular support forms. So under Quick Links and Support, it'll then load our full page of support forms, and you'll find this form in both under eBuckles and under Polaris and Leap. So if we go under eBuckles and then patron barcode change, you will find the form here. Now, the other potential reason to fill out this form that I'm sure many maybe forget to do, but if the patron is moving between libraries, even if they're not an e-content user, filling out this form fully will also notify the previous library that their patron has moved. As a courtesy, reminder, if they happen to have any sort of documentation or paperwork that they keep for certain patrons, and just to let them know. A little more important back when we used to hold on to patron registration cards. I don't know how many of us are doing that anymore, but that's still another feature of this patron barcode change. And just to explain a little further, the e-content side of that, once you fill out this form, it's not going to automatically rectify that situation with that patron when it comes to access to their e-content. This form will send a support ticket to the Buckles office automatically, where one of our staff members will then go into our Overdrive account and just merge the old patron's barcode, the patron's old barcode with their new barcode, and then they'll once again have access to the materials that they previously had either requested or currently have checked out. So just be aware of that there is a little bit of a delay on it. We do go through that process on a daily basis, but if the patron's standing in front of you, they have e-content but they lost their card and that card is getting replaced. And once you fill out this form, there might be a bit of a delay before the actual merger happens. So just make them aware of that to not panic when they check their Libby and all of a sudden their checkouts are gone. That'll be restored once someone at the office does that merger. And unfortunately, that's nothing that can happen automatically. It's not anything that's built into Leap or any other sort of automatic function. So it's just a bit of a manual process, and thus the reason for the delay. So any questions regarding the patron barcode change form, or just the procedure in general as it applies to e-content, Overdrive specifically?
So there is a question from Donna. What happens to the e-content if this form is not filled out accidentally, or accidentally not filled out?
So two things. First of all, if the patron isn't moving and the patron doesn't have e-content, it's not as important to fill out. It might come into play at some point in regards to statistics, not merging those two patrons. But there is functionally no difference for the patron if, let's say, the week they had a new barcode, the week you gave them a new barcode, they had nothing requested, nothing checked out, then they will probably not notice sort of any difference once they start using their new barcode, other than, of course, they need to put that new barcode into their Libby app, or if they or whatever platform they're using to access those Overdrive materials. If it isn't filled out immediately, let's say you change the patron barcode and they have e-content, but you maybe forget to fill out the form till later in the day, or perhaps even the next day, but you did remember to copy and paste their old barcode into the former barcode field, which is it's a good procedure to do, so you can go back and do something like that. Then they will have lost access to anything they have currently checked out. Mainly the reason for that is that old barcode is no longer being recognized as valid in Overdrive. So in other words, the Overdrive still has the barcode, but it's not being validated as a proper Buckles barcode anymore, and thus the access is lost. So it just needs to be merged. So to answer that question, if you take a day to fill out the form and the patron does have e-content, then it's going to be at least a day until they can access that e-content again. They could immediately start using their new barcode and start requesting new materials or checking out new materials, but it's mainly the content that they have out already that you need to merge the two accounts in order for them not to lose access essentially permanently to any requests that they had previously and their spot in any previous queues and so forth. That answer both those questions, I think?
Yeah, that's great. So we also have a question. Did we fill out this form when changing from a temporary card number to a regular one as well?
That is an interesting question. And I think the answer is, it's weird that I've never thought about it, but yes, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, it should be, I think.
I don't think we've ever brought that up before, or nor has anyone else. But yeah, in that case, if the patron is utilizing e-content already, then that's a really good idea. I mean, if the patron received an e-card and then immediately comes into the library and they haven't used Libby yet, then it's maybe less necessary if it's an immediate process. But in some cases, it might be a couple days or maybe even a couple weeks until they come into the library to get a permanent card, depending on what your individual library's process is. And then if they're using that temporary pack reg e-card and they want to not lose access to any checkouts that they had while just utilizing as an e-card, then yes, you should fill out the form.
Thank you for that question. I'm actively writing down ideas, topics, things that come up in all of these meetings, so I've jotted that down as well. Yeah, thank you.
That's strange that hasn't come up at all in the last year that I recall. But yeah, no, thank you very much. So moving on, if there's no further questions on that, to the rest of our reminders. The next 2 or 3 reminders kind of fall under the same general category, but it's a reminder as to where to find the various resources for reports, as well as our training materials and additional information regarding delivery practices. And once again, that is all found under My Buckles. So if you go into My Buckles under the bin, you will get the overarching page for the Buckles Information Network. And under Consortium Info, you will, actually, I'm sorry, under Staff Resources, you will find a listing of the various training materials and other staff resources you have access to once logged in. You can see there's a section on training where you'll be finding support documentation for LEAP, the Polaris client, as well as links to our Polaris LEAP webinars, which will then, as Eric mentioned earlier, we have the Buckles Tube YouTube channel. So you'll find links to that there as well, and you can see all our Polaris LEAP videos. Some content is older than others, so might need some updating, but a lot of it is still relevant, particularly if you're a new staff member and you have limited training altogether in LEAP or whatnot. Also, we have training on reports, both what each Buckles custom report is, as well as for Simply reports. Oh, and the part I skipped over is just pointing out that links to all those are available under the quick links as well. And that was brought up earlier with respect to the VPN. So we have links to both Simply reports, and the Buckles statistics page, which is sort of canned, overarching monthly and yearly reports. For those of you who don't know, Simply, but the regular reports is where you'll find reports that are very much customized to the Buckles organization that you can use, as well as some general Polaris reports, whereas Simply reports is there so you can make your own. And we're going to touch upon that a little later, a bit further. But as was pointed out earlier, you don't need to access these via My Buckles. You can certainly bookmark the URLs, memorize them. Some of them aren't too hard. I mean, Simply Reports is simplyreports.buckles.org/Simply Reports. If you care to memorize it, it doesn't require going through the My Buckles page. It's not like a gateway that blocks it off. They each has their own login and so forth. Let's see. So in addition to information on reports and LEAP training, there is a section for delivery as well. And that is both Buckles delivery as well as some additional information on LLNJ, or the statewide delivery service, if you're doing Jersey Cat loans and sending those materials out. Now, one general reminder that it comes up every now and then. Recently, a bit less so, but still worth noting that if you are doing a Jersey Cat loan, if you're sending out ILL, please make sure to properly process it based on LLNJ procedure. So in other words, for a while, when we first started our own delivery service, we were processing these a different way. It can happen that if you're a library that doesn't do ILL often, you might forget that we switched kind of back to the old system where each individual library needs to place the LLNJ, the library link, a delivery slip with the item, wrap it in a plastic bag or a Ziploc bag, rubber band it, and then just leave it with one of the Buckles drivers. You can put it on the top of one of the bins, and they'll know how to process it. There shouldn't be. We don't track it internally anymore. We were doing it for a short while, but that turned out to be too complicated and time-consuming. So we just passed that along to the warehouse and then to the library link drivers. So bear that in mind. That we, for a short period of time, switched the process, but now we're back to the old process where each individual library should be following those procedures. And again, for the Buckles delivery service, you'll find videos for delivery basics and best procedures, how you should be wrapping things, how you should be rubber banding them, and so forth. No wrapping. Wrapping's LNJ. How you should be sorting things and rubber banding them. So any questions in regards to where to find training materials, reporting, and so forth?
Mike, yes. After January 1st, if we get reports emailed to us, will we have to use the VPN to access them from home or other non-Buckles computers?
No, that would not. So the VPN, once we restrict access to essentially what's the reporting web portal, you'll only need that to interface with when you're running reports live, on demand. But if you have something on a subscription for Buckles reports and those are emailed to you, the VPN won't affect that at all. Our server will still be sending those emails out. Likewise, on Simply Reports, where you can run something on a schedule, the VPN doesn't come into play. It just affects your access to the actual login page when you're doing, you're editing your reports, you're running new reports. That's where the VPN comes into play, only on when you're off the Buckles network. Okay.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions for now.
Cool. Moving on, we will talk a little bit about PNP, and specifically what came up in the survey topics is the procedure or policy in regards to checking in and checking out materials. And what they mean by this, and what we mean by this, is if a patron, particularly when it comes to borrowing an item from another library, is out of renewals, but they still want the item, is it okay to just check in the item and check it back out again? And in the last year or so, we actually, PNP has commented on that and made policy in regards to that. So first, I'll point out that the PNP manual and PNP resources are also available via My Buckles. This is where you'll go under consortium info and then policies and procedure. And you can find individual sections of the PNP manual, as well as if you click at the top PNP manual, you'll get the overarching manual that you can view from within My Buckles or download it as a PDF. Just make sure if you're holding on to the PDF on your computer or whatnot, this gets updated pretty often, so you want to make sure you have the updated version. But getting back to that policy, under the section for renewal limits and renewals and requests, you'll see the new portion states that check-in/check-out or resetting due dates is not permitted on other libraries' material when an item has exhausted all renewals. So what that is saying is if it happens to be your library's item, regardless of whose patron it is, if someone is coming to you and it's your item and your library has decided to allow for that, as with most things, when it's your collection and your item, you have a bit of a leeway, and you could certainly make that exception for a patron and check it in and check it back out again. But when it comes to requests coming from other libraries and that request and that item is out of renewals, it is policy that that shouldn't be done. So to answer that survey question, that is how we do things when it comes to those reciprocating requests. So what the patron can do is return it and then you immediately request the item again, but it does need to return back to its home library. And then certainly if there's other requests, then definitely it needs to be checked in and just whether there's renewals left or not on the actual item, sent back or sent along to the next patron for the request. Any questions on that? It's a relatively new policy in the grand scheme of things. And libraries being closed during the pandemic, it's a thing that you could easily forget, considering certain libraries were allowing that previously before this policy was in effect. Okay, moving along.
Sorry, Mike, there is a question that just came in. Rosary asked, and the patrons who have requested again prior to returning the item?
That's an interesting question, because I don't believe the actual policy addresses that directly. And just to clarify for everyone, what she's talking about is some crafty patrons. I remember there's someone who used to borrow video games all the time when I worked at Fairview, or was it DVDs? I forget. They knew to just place that request for that item again. And from the pack, you can even do an item level request. So if there's no other holds on the item, if it's not a high demand item, what will essentially happen is when you check it in for the patron, it'll come up for them again. I know we have members from the P&P committee here, and I kind of vaguely recall discussing that the notion is that it should still be checked in and time given before that request is honored, but it doesn't specify it in the, I don't think, in the actual policy. So I don't know if anyone from PNC wants to chime in on that specifically.
It doesn't specify it. This is Chris Doto, and it doesn't specify it. But there's really, if you have it in your policy, remember these are your books, so you can put your own library policy on it. That's what we discussed about it. But it's very hard, to handle that. If it comes up that it's a request from another, it's the same person and it's another patron, I don't know how to handle it. We didn't really come up with a definitive answer on that.
This is Amy. We did talk about that maybe you should go in and look at how long the patron has had it out, because sometimes people will request that over and over again and it doesn't go back to the home library for a year. So a lot of libraries would actually like you to send it back to them and at least get it back on their shelf for overnight. We don't want to weigh in and make a policy on that per se, but I would say use your judgment on that, because if that person has had it out for a year, it may be damaged. It may need to be looked at by the home library.
So essentially, there's not an exact policy on it, but and certainly on the flip side, if you are the owning library and you find that this is occurring with your item, you can certainly just place a request on it, and that will override the request from not override, but you as the owning library, if you're using one of your cards, it'll prioritize your request, and you will get that item back, and you can check the condition of it and so forth. And this is something maybe additional policy will develop on moving forward. And certainly we're open to hearing your suggestions and recommendations, from the rest of the membership.
So Donna mentioned that if you call the home library, can they do it from their end if they want to, if you're dealing with that item that comes from somewhere, another library?
The policy doesn't say anything against that, and I think it generally falls under if you're discussing it with the owning library, they have a lot of leeway in terms of what to do with their own items. So if the owning library wants to do that for that patron, then there's certainly no policy against it. In general, most policies, not all, but most have to do with reciprocating materials and patrons and so forth. So, as the owning library, you have a lot of leeway to make exceptions for specific cases. So the answer is yes, for the most part.
Yeah, she says sometimes a student still needs the material, so that makes sense to me.
Yeah, sometimes a student needs it. Occasionally, if you have even a teacher who's using that material, that can come up often. Okay. If there's no further questions on that, the last reminder topic is items not auto-renewing. We have received some comments on that in the survey, and this is something that comes up less frequently, but still every now and then. For our support tickets at the Buckles office and just in general, discussions regarding auto-renewal, what is often the case is people will think, hey, why didn't this auto renew? Is the system broken? And we can assure you it's not. It's just there's a lot of circumstances by which auto renew will not occur for a patron. Some of which you may be aware of and that are obvious, and then there's some certain other less obvious ones. What I'm sharing here on my screen is actually the administrative view of what's kind of happening behind the scenes. And this is a quick view of some of the things, the item specific or patron record specific things that would block an auto renewal, as well as a manual renew by the patron from the pack. So if they have a lost item, if they have over 10 items overdue, if they have something long overdue, if they're over the fines threshold, those are circumstances where, related to their record, where that auto renew would not happen. As with many things, this little bit historical because the auto renew only occurs 3 days prior to the item being due. Under the same schedule where they would receive a almost overdue notice. So if any of these things were the case the morning of 3 days prior to the due date, regardless of whether a day later they returned those items or paid that fine, that auto renew didn't occur then, and the auto renew will not attempt. The system will not attempt to auto renew again. But by far the most common scenario is simply that there was a hold request on that item, or rather on that title, on that specific bibliographic record, or potentially grouped bibliographic record. I think that came up yesterday, but for now we'll just say bibliographic record at the time of auto renewal, which is I think like 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, 3 days prior to the due date. And that is sometimes really hard to track down because it has nothing to do with the availability of other titles. And that's sort of contrary to how people would suspect the system to work. We didn't design the system. It's just sort of a feature that eventually came to Polaris that we decided to start using. And maybe a little more catered to smaller libraries or just smaller library systems where as a consortium, we have sometimes many available copies of something, but if there is one other pending request for that title, the auto renew will not occur. It just sees that as something that shouldn't happen, and we have no current control over changing that behavior. Although it's something we will suggest or continue to suggest to Innovative in the future. So just to recap on that, if auto renewal occurs at 8 a.m. 3 days prior to the due date, and some other patron, let's say, I don't know, To Kill a Mockingbird, I don't know, something we have many copies of. If another patron happens to place a request very shortly before that time, and it hasn't been fulfilled by another library yet, it could block the auto renew for another patron's copy of that title. And it's something that's not obvious to the patron, particularly when they're thinking, hey, I have a fixed amount of auto renews or renewals on an item. Shouldn't I be privy to all of them? And the answer to that is not necessarily. Auto renewal is never a guarantee, nor is renewal in general, considering there can be other hold requests for an item. So, And, the patron that placed the request shortly before might get the item an hour later, but it's already too late to not have the auto renewal be blocked. So any questions on that? Another one that has come up during the meetings is it happens less often, but because of that, you may forget to sort of check for this. But if the patron is expiring soon, if their registration is expiring in a week, and obviously the auto renew is for 2 weeks or 4 weeks and so forth, that will also block the auto renew. Similar to when you would get a warning trying to check out an item where the due date would be past the patron's expiration date. So keep that in mind as well.
And Mike, you mentioned that these things wouldn't be obvious to the patron, but I think part of what you was understood is that they also won't be obvious to the staff. So when you guys
Correct.
are looking at the records, especially these hold situations, you're not seeing a hold remaining. So you're thinking that something went wrong when in fact the hold just has been filled. So it's not always obvious to a staff member either. Certainly not the patron, but we understand that it's not obvious to you guys. So, but what we've found is in basically every case we've investigated, that wasn't one of the things that you're seeing on your screen. It was a hold that interfered on the day at that moment that maybe was gone afterwards. So that's why you guys don't see it on your end after the fact.
Yeah, hold requests in that respect can be very ephemeral. They sort of, once they're fulfilled, they're gone, and they're a little harder to track down. As a staff member, you can kind of go back in an item history, maybe, but again, this applies to the whole title, and it's certainly very difficult as a staff member to track this down sometimes. And certainly,
you have to check every single item history that's attached to that same bib record to see if one item in the group, and for To Kill a Mockingbird, oh man, I wouldn't want to be the one doing that, to see if any one of them filled a hold right around the time that the auto renew was attempted, which has, yes, often been the case. And we've done that work to look into this when people have written in, but we can kind of confidently say that if it's none of these reasons, then it's a hold that's interfered in all those cases.
Yeah, we've never found, other than on 2 specific dates we've sent emails out about where something was broken, we've never found that there's any sort of glitch in the system. There's only one instance where I really couldn't figure out why it didn't auto renew out of like the many tickets that we get. So the system is working as designed, maybe not as desired, but as intended by how it's set, in terms of how it was developed by Innovative, the Polaris people. Okay, so moving on, we're already an hour in, so we should pick up the pace. We will be moving on to general topics, some of which may be the elephant in the room or the pink elephant. If you're like, hey, was I drinking too much, or did we, was there supposed to be damage functionality in Leap and so forth? And when is unique sign-in happening? So we're going to be discussing that now. So we'll be discussing unique sign-on first. We had a lot of support. Our survey form, there were a lot of questions regarding that and a lot of concerns. So we will cover that now. Let's see. So first and foremost, for those of you who don't know, in the coming months, there's no specific dates out there yet, and it'll be a very gradual transition, but Buckles will be moving to individual individual logins to access Leap and the related reporting and the Polaris client. So no longer will you be logging in with Tenafly Circ or your general Circ account when you're accessing Leap, but each individual staff member will have their own login per each library that they work at. So if you work at multiple libraries, you'll have a Tenafly. We'll just pick on Tenafly. You'll have a Tenafly login with your name to access Leap, and this only applies to logging into those individual websites. This does not apply to the computer. For anyone who opens up the library in the morning or has to restart the computer, you may be aware you might need to. The general circulation login is also the login to access your Buckles computer, and that will not be changing currently. You'll still be using the general circulation login for that, but moving forward at some point you will need to use a unique or individual login. So if you are at the Circ desk and you only have one circulation terminal, as is the case for some of our smaller libraries, when you're assisting a patron and then one staff member leaves or it's a transition of shifts, you'll need to log out and then log back in again on your specific username. And this will help facilitate a few different things. One, just tracking the history of who happened to interface with a specific item or a specific patron, and not even necessarily, if someone did something wrong, but even, if an issue occurs with a patron for some reason, and you look back and you see that this specific staff member, handled or last modified their registration, then maybe they would be the ones to immediately ask in regards to a scenario or so forth. Also for compliance for things like credit cards and so forth for those, particularly in the future as there may be more interfacing with that. It's very necessary, similar to like a retail scenario where each individual employee, you want to have them uniquely logged into whatever interface you're using. So before I go a little further into that, any questions, comments, concerns, anything, any feedback right off the bat?
So Donna says we jump on and off each computer. At any given time, a staff member may go into the stacks and another jumps on the computer.
Yeah, and that's the concern we've seen from most people, that sort of busy scenario. It's one thing if you're quietly sitting at a Circ desk and you have plenty of terminals available, but particularly as business picks up in library world, if you only have one or two computers at the Circ desk or the reference desk, and staff members are constantly sharing that computer, that seems to be the scenario that people are concerned about. Now, it is possible to for multiple people to log into Leap on different browsers. It's something we're taking into consideration when we potentially make future policy or procedure or recommendation regarding that. At the moment, we just know we're going to be applying this on the technical level, and there's still this is going to go through P&P probably to a degree, and then each individual library will probably have their own policies in regards to this. So it may very well be your library decides to use two different browsers if there's two different staff members manning a single Circ station. You just need to be aware of using the correct account and making sure you log off when necessary, whether you're changing your shift or so forth. Yes, you also have to be very careful in regards to keeping records open, not having a record stay locked, whether it be an item record or a patron record. So someone's commented that it sounds like Big Brother. It's kind of the normal scenario, though, for, again, like a retail environment or any sort of staff environment. I mean, each of our libraries are different. I know there's some libraries with, security cameras all over the Circ desk, and, others, a little less so for our smaller libraries. But it's really, this is not about, keeping a watchful eye over which individual staff member is doing something, but it's really about helping each individual library manage their staff and manage that, and keep track of who's just doing what at your library. And it also comes into play when it comes to passwords. There might be an instance where during staff turnover, your director wants to change the password. So instead of changing the password for that one employee who left, it winds up being a scenario where everybody needs to learn this new password. And did you let the weekend staff know, and so forth. And particularly as the way the system works now, we're using the general Circ login. That affects that as well. So they can't even get onto the computer if they don't know the password, if they're opening up in the morning on a Sunday or, something like that. So that's really what we're keying in on. It's been requested. It's actually a thing that's occurring more in library world. We have other consortium doing the same thing. And there's certainly been scenarios where particularly directors are like, this is sort of a needed thing to avoid certain situations.
Just to chime in for a quick second, the main focus that we have when we're looking at integrating something like this is that it's really to protect the information that's in our database. We need to be able to make sure that only those who have the password or should have access to it can access it. And as I was saying before, from the outside, we fix that with VPN. So you have to know credentials to even get into the VPN so that you can access the servers. But inside, right now, if you work at one of the libraries, the password, for that library, for multiple libraries. If you never changed the default password that I think all of you kind of know, and if a library didn't change the default password, you could probably guess another library's password pretty easily. So, things like that we want to try to avoid so that each individual staffer has their own credentials. And then, as Mike was mentioning, it really does help as well with turnover. You can easily turn off access to an individual staffer's password as opposed to trying to quickly change it in a quick rush on a Friday night before the skeleton crew starts on the holiday weekend or something. So yeah. Yep.
So in regards to that, Rosary asked, are there blocks if someone from, say, Tenafly tries to log in from Hoboken?
Say again?
So will there be blocks in place, or will there be something in place to stop somebody from, say, Tenafly logging in from Hoboken?
Oh, that's an interesting question. And I think by default, no. But if that's something that's needed, it's perhaps something we can look into. Certainly, if you're a staff member that works at multiple libraries, you could potentially accidentally log into the wrong account. But that's why we're going to have on each username the actual library as part of your username now. So it'll be the library, your library abbreviation will be there, as well as your name for your username. So I think it'll be a scenario that's possible, but with a level of care. I mean, it's certainly possible now that you could log in with the wrong Circ account, the generalized Circ account. So now
I made a note about that. Thank you, Rosary. When we continue talking about how we're going to implement the unique login piece over the next couple of months, we'll look at that as something to see if it's something we can implement as well.
And in regards to whether it records the staff member on each transaction, I don't think it's maybe not every single thing you do in Leap, but certainly on item history checkouts and so forth. Like if you look at the item history, you should see the username where you currently see, Tenafly Circ, Hoboken Circ, the abbreviation. You would see that username there, as well as the workstation. So for most of the major functions, for like a patron registration, for instance, you'll see the last user that modified that patron registration. So
is each transaction to each patron connected to a particular staff member?
Just a little bit of what I just answered. Certainly each item transaction, like a checkout, trying to think of exceptions.
I believe it, Mike, isn't it? It's primarily changes to the database that are logged, not just access.
Oh, yeah. it's not keeping track of every little single thing you're doing, but when you're actually conducting a change, conducting a circulation transaction, and it's most of what it records is more on the item level side of things than the patron level, because there's not really in Leap there isn't like a full history of everything that's occurred on the patron record, but certainly you'll see the last person to, like, say, modify the registration on a patron, and if it's a renewal, a manual renewal on that patron's record, then once you go into that item history, you should see that there under the item history.
And somebody asked, will it still say which workstation we are using as well as the user? It will. In regards to workstations, nothing will be changing. It will now say the user, the individual user, and then the workstation. So that is everything with respect to that is remaining in place. And there is I was mentioning earlier, you do need to be careful about keeping records open, particularly if you're going to use multiple browsers. There is a timeout. I don't know if you've ever left Leap open for a long time, but you will get this screen asking you to sign in again under that specific username or to log out fully. Now this does occur, but it doesn't close the records in the background necessarily. So you shouldn't rely on the timeout for logging you out because, particularly if you have multiple browser windows open, you could have someone who was logged in in the morning, and they may be their credentials may have expired, as this says, but those records may still be locked until you log out fully or sign back in again and close those records. So be aware of that. And this is going to be a process. This is nothing we're doing overnight over the weekend. We're going to be gradually rolling this out in the months to come, and there'll certainly be more discussion and certainly, again, this will come up in P&P and probably at various other meetings throughout Buckles. On the upside, though, a benefit of this is that in addition to having individual logins for Leap, you will also be able to have your individual and unique login for Simply Reports and regular Buckles reporting. And for the time being, we're not going to immediately get rid of the general circulation logins for those as well. You'll still be able to access those, I do believe, particularly during the transition. Everyone has saved reports and subscriptions there. This is particularly beneficial for Simply Reports because particularly if you work at a larger library, as you may be aware, Simply Reports only allows one login at a time. So if you're a head of Circ doing some sort of report on Simply Reports at your library and the director's trying to get in with that same circulation username, I won't let them in until the other person logs out. This will rectify that problem, and everyone will have their own login. They can set up their own subscriptions on Buckles reporting, and they can set up their own scheduled reports on Simply Reports without having to yes, Danielle, this applies to Polaris in general. So, you figure Leap and Polaris have the same login. So this will occur also with the Polaris client if you're still using that for technical services or, managing item templates and so forth. Okay, we're running a little short on time, so we'll jump to the next big, maybe not topic of conversation, but thing everybody wants to know about, and that's the damaged, the item condition tracking within Leap that has been discussed. For those of you who aren't aware, earlier in the year and discussed in our last circulation meetings, the Policies and Procedures Committee put together a new rubric and policy for tracking, keeping good track of the item condition and management of damaged materials overall. And alongside that, we're developing functionality within Leap to help facilitate that. And we showed off a little bit of that previously, and there's been delays in finishing the development of that. And we are here to report that that's going to be going live sometime this month. There'll be an additional
There'll be emails going out, maybe a little short video, and we're going to have a gradual phase in this month for that. So just to show you what I'm talking about, I punch in an item record on the test server and go to blocks and notes. Under where you'd normally just see a field for physical condition, the functionality will be there to follow the policy and procedure committee's sort of rubric and mark an item on the 3 tiers they've developed: normal, wear and tear, fair, or poor, and then the ability to add additional details in regards to that specific condition. And if you need to add additional note, which the idea of this is to avoid having too many unique notes if you don't need to. But if you need to say something else about that item or the condition of that item, you can also click additional notes and type it in there. I know this is something everyone was excited about, but then there's been this long delay implementing it, so that's going to be occurring this month. You'll be able to see the item condition history right from that window, and this is something any library will be able to do to an item as it's circulating throughout the system to keep track of item condition. So it's something you'll be able to flag. Rather than adding a note to the card, you can modify the physical condition status on an item, before you put it into delivery. And that way, if, when it comes out of delivery, if it's in a worse status, it happened during delivery, or the vice versa, it's a patron that did it, or a staff member, or whomever, you can kind of keep better track of the history of the condition of an item. And certainly on the long term, even a tool that you can utilize for collection development or reading, outside of other criteria, all other things being equal, you can see, oh, well, these items, we have a bunch of copies of this one item, but these are in poorer condition. Let me find them and, read them. In addition to this functionality, we'll also be releasing a few other bells and whistles at the same time. This is kind of like a bulk update or customization to Leap. It's not just the damaged item stuff. For those of you who've been paying attention or are aware of, we recently implemented the Buckles barcode fix little functionality that was speeding up when you're scanning a patron barcode. We had a lot of complaints that was running really slow. So we kind of implemented a custom tweak that you need to manually turn on currently, because we want to sort of put that through a beta phase, but we've received absolutely no complaints about it. So once everything else goes live, that'll be on by default. So you won't need to worry about turning that back on. And there'll be a few other bells and whistles as well. We added a links section, or actually we changed, let me jump back here. We changed the help drop down to links, and you'll still see the same regular Leap topics, keyboard, and about. We've also added generalized Buckles links as well. And this kind of touches back to what was brought up before about accessing reporting, when we were discussing the VPN. And so this will be another outlet for quickly accessing reports or any other links we add to this. One thing I'll touch on is if we open on, say, Buckles reports, what's often the case is you don't want to open that up in the same browser, because often you want to just keep Leap open in whichever browser, let's say Firefox. That way you don't need to toggle between the printer you're using. Most people like it to stay on the receipt printer and not have to worry about it. So if you do want to open up one of these links quickly in a different browser to facilitate that, you can also click on the little icon next to each link. Let's do simply reports, and I'll click it there, and it'll copy it to your clipboard. So you can then open up a different browser and just paste it right in. Oh, and one other quick note, I actually remembered to log in not as myself, but as a different library this time. But if you're clicking or copying the link to the catalog, it'll also pass along the actual CTX number of whatever library you're logged in as currently. So you won't need to manually switch the branch when you're following the link from there. So you see here we're currently logged in, or we're on the catalog as Tenafly since we were in Leap as Tenafly. any questions in regards to that?
Yeah, Mike, Rosary asked, will the damaged portion track who entered the note, i.e. the individual login?
Oh, yes. Let's see. Where am I going? We're still adjusting some bells and whistles, but the full condition history will have, currently don't have the workstations on here, which we might add to see if that'll be necessary or not, kind of limited amount of space, but it will have the user by default here. And obviously when we move to individual logins rather than seeing 1005 Circ, you'll see which user updated that. And we'll probably add the, before this goes live, I'll see about maybe adding the workstations as well, because that might be useful information. Does that answer the question? I think that's what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
cool.
That's great. Rosary, when you get a chance, if you can, the other question you asked, which is, will this be rolled out at the same time as individual login? Can you just verify what you were talking about when you said will this be rolled out? I'm not sure it came in at the same time as the topic that we were discussing. So just let me know. Thank you. And I think you're good to go, Mike.
Okay, so we have a handful of other topics that we don't necessarily all need to, we don't necessarily need to cover all of them. It depends on your interests. Most of these or all of these came from our survey topics. I'll just breeze through them, and then I'll look for a general conversation with the little bit of time we have remaining. I know in previous meetings, some of these didn't really strike up much conversation, but topics of conversation are replacement copies, and this is something that has been brought up in P&P and so forth, and probably one of the ones that we've gotten the most feedback on. That is, if your library will accept a replacement copy from a patron. And then there's a scenario, well, what if that item is from another library? The procedure you follow with respect to inquiring to the other library if they'll take a replacement copy. I'm just going to breeze through these real quick, and then we'll just jump back, and I want to hear your comments about all this. But another thing that came up is lost video games. There's a lot of libraries have noticed, and we've gotten some feedback on that certain high-profile item types, namely, like, let's say, Nintendo Switch games, seem to go missing more than others, whether it be off your shelves or through delivery. So there's been a lot of inquiries in regards to how to mitigate that, what other libraries are doing. I know it's something we've taken a look at the Buckles office, and we've been tracking in certain individual cases. We've seen some improvement on that as well, but it's certainly something that's been on some people's minds. We got a question about PO boxes that we didn't get much additional info along with it, but I think the question there was how libraries handle patrons that want to utilize PO boxes. And what I'll say real quick there is, obviously that doesn't really qualify the patron in terms of verifying their residency, because obviously membership to your library is based on residency and owning property or living with someone who owns property in town. That's generally the case. However, it might be the case that patron would prefer not to have either mail go to their regular address, or just have their regular address listed at all for certain privacy concerns, because certain patrons might have home situations where they need to be very guarded about their home address. So in those cases, it's certainly up to that home library to verify the patron's residency, but then on their record, perhaps only put in the PO box and maybe make some other note of it somewhere else, whether it be a hard copy or just, hey, talk to the director if there's an issue with this patron or so forth. So there's certainly some patrons with just PO boxes, but likely, not many, but likely they've otherwise verified their residency. The last three are fines for fine-free libraries, and this was mainly a comment about informing if you're a fine-free library, trying to educate your patrons in regards to the fact that they'll still receive fines for items from other libraries who aren't fine-free. And I think there's just a general like, hey guys, can we do a better job somehow? Because I'm sure some patrons get very confused, particularly as you're initially transitioning to find free. And I'm sure there's some curiosity in terms of how other libraries are handling this with their patrons. And then the last two are simply media item limits, wondering what libraries might still impose certain limitations on certain materials. I know back in the day, more libraries, had fixed limits on DVDs. That's gone the wayside just a little bit. I'm sure some libraries still do it, but certainly with video games, they're even higher demand and more expensive. There might be libraries that have certain limits. There is no material type specific limitations that are available in LEAP in the actual system. Those are just imposed by each individual library. So there's some curiosity in terms of what other libraries are doing. And then lastly, patron privacy was just wondering what wondering what libraries are doing in terms of guarding patron privacy, particularly on things like hold slips or checkout slips. Does every library keep a paper shredder next for when they're handling essentially anything with the patron's information written on it? Others might just tear it up real quick and that's that. What are you guys doing? And the one note I had in regards to this one is that if you happen to be a library that has transitioned or partially transitioned or is going to transition to self-serve pickups, let's say if you have a hold shelf that patrons can access the items themselves, and they either bring it to the Circ desk or check it out with the MeScan app or MeScan kiosk or some other self-check system that you have at your library. There is an option for a hold pickup slip you can transition your library to or a specific workstation to that has less personal information on it than your regular hold slip that you would that would be generated for the staff to look at. So if that's something your library is interested in, if you're thinking of going to self-service pickup where you're concerned that those slips that are out and available to the public have a patron's phone number or email address on it, that's something you can request. You can just put in a Polaris support ticket, and we can, or your director or head of Circ can, and we can see about transitioning all your workstations or one of your specific workstations to generate those slips instead. In fact, it's actually something you can turn on in the LEAP settings if you go to the receipt settings, but in terms of the type of slip and how you want it to display, that's something you'll need to discuss with the Buckles office to have set up for you. So after that long-winded recap of our other topics, let's look at what other people are saying. Amanda mentioned, and Carl said and we've heard from other libraries that Switch games in particular seem to be missing, to go missing en route, and obviously that doesn't necessarily mean it was lost in delivery, but that might be the case. It could also just have not gotten checked in somewhere. It's a scenario we've been tracking very carefully. It's and we're all aware of it. Our delivery managers were aware of it, and we've been taking steps here and there to investigate certain things. But whether it's an issue on a specific library's end or via delivery, it's a difficult situation to keep track of. And certainly for guarding games from internal theft, or rather, to go missing off your shelves, as Kelly's mentioning, and it's very much like a lot of libraries used to do for DVDs or Blu-rays. You can keep them either everything or just the actual disc or cartridge, behind the Circ desk to protect it there as well. So we're just about out of time. We can certainly stay a bit for overtime, but are there any other comments regarding these last few topics we've brought up?
So on that last topic, if an item has to be scanned to the warehouse because it lost its delivery slip, will it show up in the item history? If so, what does it say? Warehouse?
Oh, that's a good question. I do believe it will say it. Yes, because it's being checked in at a different location than it was last checked in as. You should see that in the item history, and that will likely. You should see a specific workstation labeled for the warehouse, and trying to think how those computers are set up, but you might see Christine's name, our delivery manager. I think because that would be her login for Leap. It won't say warehouse specifically, certainly not the whole warehouse, but it might have an indicator that it's a workstation from the warehouse.
So if we can go back to Rosary's question, she said, will this be rolled out the same time that individual login does? And she said she was referring to the ability to use, I believe, Leap to access Simply reports.
Oh, so the new little shortcuts.
The new link.
That'll be rolled out before. I actually thought she was maybe referring to the damage thing rolling out along with, but no. So that's all going to come before we make any major changes to the unique logins. That's going to occur this month, whereas the single sign, or rather the unique sign-ons, are going to be in the months to come, and there'll be more emails about that as that occurs. So this will be available before the unique sign-on, or before everyone gets their own individual logins. I think across the board. I mean, starting soon, we'll be doing some testing at individual libraries, but in December, everything else will go live, including those links.
And the ability to log into Simply reports using the individual logon.
Oh, okay. Maybe I misunderstood the question.
No, she just clarified.
Oh, okay, cool. That's probably going to roll out a little more along the same time, because we need to create those individual users. There might be a scenario where we haven't disabled. There's a little bit of planning left to do on this, but there might be a scenario where we haven't disabled the Circ login yet at a library, and they already have individual logins so they can access reporting. But for the most part, that will all occur at around the same time. As I mentioned earlier, the general Circ login will still be available for reporting for a decent while longer after we've restricted Leap login to individual staff usernames.
Great, thank you. And I'd like to return to Eric. There was a question that came in about Vega, and will Vega be able to include records from places like Canopy and Hoopla, or EBSCO's public domain works?
So the short answer is yes, mostly. The long detailed answer is that we're starting with Overdrive, because that is the central collection and system that all libraries use, because we have that central collection. So the Overdrive digital content is going to be available first in there. And then as product development continues, the plan is that they will have Hoopla integration and other things. Canopy currently does not have what's called API access, which is how we would integrate with it. However, Canopy was recently purchased or acquired by a company that does do API for integration. So we may be seeing that soon. And then other sources, that's all possible down the road. The long-term plan is that, this, like many discovery layers, can function and search across multiple sources of information and databases to find materials. So that is the long-term plan, is to add more as well. Does it include Overdrive through eLibrary and J? Not initially, but yes, it should be able to link up to multiple. We're starting with just the Buckles central collection first when it launches.
Great. Thank you.
And, I think I'll just reiterate I think the overarching message when it comes to a lot of these things, that whether it be Vega, VPN, VPN's coming a bit sooner, but Vega and the unique sign-on it's going to be a gradual transition. No one's going to be surprised over a weekend, and there'll be plenty more emails going out about it, and more policy and refinement of how this all is going to happen.
Yeah, as an example, just yesterday, after one of our Circ meetings, I had a library reach out to me who was setting up VPN access on Chromebooks, And it was a perfect reminder that I hadn't put any instructions for how to set that up on a Chromebook. So I just recently updated the instructions that are available through my Buckles and everywhere with Chromebook details, and I'll be sending out an email shortly to all about that. Those instructions have been added.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, I think we can wrap it up. So first, thank you to everybody from the Buckles office for being here to help us with the Buckles Fall Circ meetings. And thank you to Chris and Amy from the P&P committee. We really appreciate the support. And thank you to everybody who attended. Before we go, you're going to see a little announcement pop up for you, and that is a link to our survey. If you could either click on that link and go ahead and fill out the survey, or you can copy it and paste it into your browser. We'd really appreciate that. Let us know what you thought. Any thoughts and comments are really appreciated. And again, thank you all for being here. Very happy holidays to you. Enjoy the rest of your day.